So in the design development phase, you're refining the furniture layout, you're having some more, are you doing additional client interviews at that point where you're going back and helping them refine now as you're moving those details into place, solidifying them?
Yes, I think design develop, programming is very much a macro picture at the time, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you know every little thing that the accounting department does. It doesn't necessarily mean that you've contabulated how fast files come in and out of an office. That's your opportunity to go and figure that out and make sure that you're actually using the 450 square feet or whatever you've allotted for that department the most effectively. And sometimes, going back to your point, that's usually when you sometimes will have to revisit programming, and maybe you started at 450 square feet, but now you really feel like they need 600 square feet in order to make it function correctly. I think you're constantly going back and forth. There's no way to avoid it.
In the design development phase, can you talk a little bit about the feeling of when you come off the elevator and you're coming into the lobby area, so to speak, of Wheeler? What did you want them to feel? How did they move through the space? What were some of the design features, other than the stairwell you've mentioned, that you really wanted to be part of the essence of this?
I think for Wheeler, they had such a passion for art, and that really drove our aesthetic direction too, because they were looking at some very unique pieces of artwork, and we wanted to make sure that all the decisions that we made made the artwork look better than like a gallery. So I guess what I'm getting at is, what I wanted everyone to feel like when they get off the elevator every day is that they're in a museum, they're in a gallery, and it's their chance to look. They may pass the same painting every day two or three times, but when they get off the elevator in the morning, I want them to have that impression of, wow, it's another day. Maybe I didn't notice those details before. There's got to be little surprises that kind of happen, even when you've been in a space for six months or even a year. I think in this space in particular, the big wow piece was the view. We wanted to make sure that we centered the reception area on the view, and that every day it was all about, yes, I'm in Colorado, regardless of whether or not I get to get out and enjoy it, I'm still in Colorado. So that was our big focus, was not, the detailing had to stay clean so that the emphasis stayed on the view. But
anything else as you kind of take us through the spaces, the trial area, the conference rooms? I've noticed that some have areas where there's refreshments that are set up.
They eat all the time here.
Do they?
All the time.
Really?
Yeah, and that's, if you're talking about programming and the importance of programming, I wish I had asked more questions about how much food they consume in conferences, because we designed these conference rooms for basic coffee service. What we didn't figure out is that they also bring in snacks periodically, and that a deposition can be all day. So they're bringing in lunches, they're doing, it's like you're living in this room for, it could be a whole week. But they're constantly bringing in drinks and coffees and candy and all this stuff, and what I'm noticing is that they're using surfaces for food prep that I didn't intend for them to use. So if I could go back and ask all the right questions, I'd say, how much food do you typically consume, like in one conference room per day?
And what kind of food?
And what kind of food, yeah. We did ask some of those questions, and this is why you get these little bar areas in the conference center, because we didn't want lunches to be set up while they were having meetings. We wanted it to be in view so they knew that the food was ready, but we didn't want them to have caterers coming in and out during confidential meetings. So all of the lunches and everything should be prepared on that side of the glass, and then that way they'll know when they're supposed to get up and actually move around, which is good for them anyway. So
Boy, I didn't pick up on that at all when I was walking through the space, so I'm glad you...
The food?
Well, the bar area on the outside so that they could set up the food. I just thought it was a nice detail.
Yeah, and this is a good... We did this at Dorsey and Whitney, which is the law firm I worked on before this one. And it was new for them as a concept, and it worked really, really well. So, I think part of being a designer is, coming up with great ideas, but then really analyzing how well they work once they're, in use. And every time I went over there, they were using that, pretty effectively. So I thought it was something that we should bring over here as well. So luckily it's working out.
It's great. It's a really...
Yeah, and it keeps the rooms clean. That's my big thing at the end of the day. I want to eliminate clutter as much as possible. And luckily they do too. So it's not that they want a lot of stuff laying around, but they have to be able to get to it to remove it. So.
Well, and eliminate the interruptions, which halts the work that needs to be done.
Yeah.
And so that's...
Well, and that was a big thing in this. Every aspect of the space was, there's a catering kitchen that's adjacent to the mock courtroom as well, and there's a huge wall that actually slides over that kitchen so that when they're not serving food, they can just roll the wall like a barn door, roll it down, and then everyone in the back of house can clean that space up without interrupting any of the mock court experiences that are going on the other side. So I mean those types of details really played into, I think, every meeting space in this building. In this space.
What about the big kitchen that's on a different floor?
The break room?
The break room. And it's bigger than a break room to me. It feels like...
It's a lunchroom because when you're an attorney, you don't take breaks, is what they told me. So, yeah, that's what they told me. So we call it a lunchroom, and we actually changed it on our plan to say lunchroom because we were kind of forbidden to refer to it as a break room. And there's no TV. But if you'll notice, there is a telephone, and even in the locker facility that we put in here, there's still telephones. There's no place anyone can really hide for any extended period of time without people tracking them. Yeah. But the lunchroom on 47, that was probably what I would consider the more fun room and probably the most branded too. It was an opportunity, Kelly Green is part of their logo, O'Donnell being Irish, and it doesn't make a great paint color, but it does make a great fabric choice. So we were able to kind of bring in, aspects of that Kelly Green into the lunchroom where we weren't able to do it in some of the more grown-up spaces in other parts of the building. So.
And I liked the banquette. I liked the lighting. The tables were really a nice feature. And again, the views are still...
Yeah, we call that the Omaha side of the building because it's not mountains, but it's still a pretty nice view. When you're on the 47th floor, there's not really a bad view in any direction. But we also were able to reuse their old signage in that space, so that white glass plaque, that's actually the main sign from their old office. So we were able to bring that over with us and reuse it in that space.
So I guess I should have mentioned this or asked this earlier. So sustainable features, you talked about the reuse of the furniture, the plaque, and were there other things at all that were sustainable strategies that were used or green design that were used?
Well, probably the biggest things were mechanical and electrical. Everything's been designed to a LEED standard. We didn't pursue LEED CI for this space, mainly because they're in a LEED building. So we were already doing a number of sustainable practices just in order for them to be in this space. This is a LEED EB, which is existing buildings. As a client, it was very hard to convince them from a marketing perspective that spending the money on the documentation involved with LEED CI was good. I think most firms in town you'll find will always do the right sustainable thing, but they don't necessarily see the benefit in spending what I think can sometimes be 17 to 20% more in design fees in order for us to get that placard. Usually where we have more success with LEED certified interiors is with clients that really need that from a marketing perspective, and Wheeler just didn't see the value in that. Now, it's not to say that they didn't stress healthy, sustainable environment, because they did, and we've got a packet of information that we've passed on to their marketing lady that kind of details all of our processes and what we did without them knowing about it to keep the space sustainable. So, probably the biggest things that I know of is just regional materials. We tried to select, the carpet is made in California, which is just outside that 500 square foot, that 500 mile radius, but it's still as close as we can get it, without having to go to Dalton, Georgia. The eucalyptus wood, even though that wasn't farmed, in a 500 mile radius, it was all treated here locally in Denver. All of our glass was purchased in Denver. All the marble was quarried in Denver.
It was?
Yeah. The reason you can tell is this has got a gold vein. Yeah, so it's not a true Carrara marble. I actually think it's called gold, something gold vein, but it's quarried locally. So, there's all these little, what I think are nice nods to regionalism that we've tried to make them aware of, so that when they're walking people through, they can actually tell a story. And I think there's great stories everywhere, just with the simplest little decisions. But.
Well, and it's truly Colorado still. It's just different than the slate and the really rough materials.
Yes, and I don't think there's any New York attorney that gets off the elevator here that's not going to feel at home. I don't think there's anything here that's really pushy, that's so in your face that it's like rough and tumble Colorado. It's still a refined atmosphere. Mm-hmm. So. And I love this client because of that. Because I just love the fact that I didn't have a client saying, we want a Colorado palette. Because that's generally how design directions start, with people that don't really know what to say.
Yeah. Well, and you celebrate place, but there's a different way to celebrate place.
Exactly.